Good morning.
Good morning. I'm John Brahaney, and for the purposes of this interview, I am the husband of Joanne Brahaney. And a reminder, I'll jump in every now and then. She's given me permission to do that because we have discussed these things together many times, and we have many of the same experiences to share. But this is her interview, and so I will just jump in whenever I can think I can be helpful.
Whenever I can leave an opening.
Whenever she stops talking, I'll Anyway, Joanne has had a fascinating background. Her first introduction into the creative business was as Atlanta's first female nighttime rock DJ, and first full-time female.
That was in the days when women on the radio or television only did things like the weather or the social pages,
Right.
who was marrying who.
Yeah. And in the South, when
Especially,
the next cotillion
this was
coming.
Atlanta, Georgia,
Yeah. But
The next
so
cotillion.
Joanne has a history of breaking boundaries like that, which is one of the things.
Glass ceilings be damned.
Yeah.
Right.
And so she went from there into being a record promoter at GRC Records in Atlanta, and then into music publishing, where she started having the opportunity to help educate people, particularly songwriters and recording artists, on where they wanted to go and what they wanted to do and what their creative problems were, as well as their business problems. And from there started her own consultancy after that company went out of business.
The record company
the
where I
record
was
company,
working.
yeah.
When it folded, all the songwriters called me at home and said, "What do we do now?"
Yeah.
And that's when I thought might be a good time to try to figure out with them what their next steps would be.
Yeah.
And that was the first time we were talking about this on the way over here for this interview. And I said to John, I said, after all the work I had done previous to that, I was never in a position to be asked, so what do I do with my copyrights, with my songs? Do I need to notify my co-writer? All those kinds of little problems.
And with my career.
And with my career, what do I do? So that didn't come to be until I got into the world of publishing. So, but that's back history. There are a lot of things that that I could say about what I've done since then, because that's quite a few years ago. But basically, to start by saying I have a history in working with creative people on their careers. So what I do now is career counseling for artists of all kinds.
And when we met, and Joanne, I persuaded her to move to LA. She had some great jobs in which she was working with creative people. She worked for Rogers & Cowan Public Relations.
That's in Beverly Hills, and Rogers & Cowan, by the way, started there as a temporary secretary, and worked into doing a lot of things with interviews with people, with photo sessions, with scheduling a lot of things with internationally known celebrities that I never would have even thought that I could have done. And I mentioned that for one of the points that I've brought with me today, which we're going to get to. And also after that worked with Walt Disney Imagineering.
Yeah, Walt Disney Imagination was amazing.
Imagineering.
Imagineering was.
We're talking about imagination.
Yeah, that's their where their product was creativity. That was the theme park division, where they planned, created, thought up all the stuff for the theme parks, and so it was, their business was creativity. So Joanne would come home with these, talking about blue sky sessions and all kinds of incredible things that I, having been in the songwriting side of this, kept saying, wow, that's just like it works. There's such a parallel to all these things. And yours were primarily visual artists, and mine were auditory artists, but there were parallels. The creative process has so many parallels in all the different arts that was what was really fascinating to us. But you started working then with, once that was over, you started working, doing seminars with me on the creative process, and then also starting to do consults with people who said, well, I'm, that these kind of things are happening to me, or I lost my job, or I've always wanted to do this. And so that's when you started thinking in terms of how can I help these people
Exactly.
to go to the next step. So
Which
you've
is
got
a
some
lot
things
of what
worked
you
out.
do with songwriters
Yeah.
specifically and musicians. So we had a lot back and forth that we shared and that we did together. Either they would come to John for and they still do, for songwriting consultations, or they come to me more for other lines of work. But just to put a finer point on it, what we also do is talk to people who are maybe just getting out of school or changing jobs or want to get into the arts for the first time. We talk to parents a lot whose kids are now excelling in the arts, and maybe they just got a role in Hollywood on a television show, and now what do I do? So we talk on those topics. It's a lot of fun talking to retirees, people who are now relatively through with their responsibilities at work, and they want to go back to something they used to love before they had a family and needed to get out to support them and so forth.
They wanted to be an artist, they wanted to write songs, they wanted to, and they kind of put all that on hold, and now we've got a huge baby boomer population who want to get back to doing those things that they loved before they had to get a real job.
So they come and we have a good time with these people. So what I put together for today and wanted to cover as quickly as I can, because I know we have a time limit, but I thought about 5 specific points, and these are items that you would consider if you are, especially in this economy right now that's so iffy. People are either afraid they're going to lose a job, or they think they would rather go ahead and get rid of the job, because some people are buying them out to leave early, so that's changing their lives, or they have already lost their job, they don't know what they're going to do next. And so I kept thinking, you hear this, it's very, very scary to listen to the radio a lot or watch TV, read the paper and so forth, and say, wow, our world is changing in front of us. They're not telling us very much about what it's going to look like for us. So we are kind of in the dark with what to expect. So I thought, what could perhaps ease my mind anyway about how to approach the change in our work world. So I came up with 5 points. I'm sure there are many more, but 5 to do for today. One is to look back. And this is just my own particular way of handling things when I'm kind of in indecision, doubt, frustration, and I don't know what's going on around me. So in the looking back, I call that my rear view mirror. So the first thing I do is check the rear view mirror. I'll talk about that in a second. The second thing is to look into your crystal ball, and that has to do with looking into the future. The third thing is to look at where you are right now in a very realistic manner, if possible. The fourth is to try and look around and see what other skills or crafts, whatever, that you might want to build and put a fine point on for yourself to hone. And the fifth is to remember to be good to yourself through all of this stress that we're all going through. It's something that many of us forget. I remember talking to some rock and rollers who were all nervous about their gigs. They had a tour lined up and they were packing all their bags and they couldn't remember if they had everything. And I grabbed one of them and said, because a good friend, and said, remember you did this because you wanted to have fun? This is supposed to be fun? And he was just pulling his hair out, I said, oh yeah, that's right, this is supposed to be fun. So same thing with this, you want to remember to be good to yourself through all of the hard times we're all facing, I think, in one way or another. So the rear view mirror. First place I look, and you and I were talking about this. It's kind of one of those things, John, when people get into a place of doubt and frustration, they tend to look back over their lives and look at the bad things. They say, oh yeah, I know, I went for that job interview and at that company, and boy, they really hated me. That was 10 years ago. I don't dare go back there. Wait a minute, so you're looking back at the last time you failed.
Yeah.
And my point is, wouldn't it be cool if you could look back on the last time you succeeded and have a little list of all those good things you've
Anything.
done related to work or accomplishments, something that you did that you're proud of, that you felt good about, that someone somewhere came up and said, cool, you did that? That's great. Either a teacher, or maybe it was someone at work, maybe it was in sports, you got the winning point, or you made the point, the team lost, but you still made your effort at scoring something good for the team. So something where people commented on and made you feel good about something you've done.
Even if they didn't comment on it, even if it was something that just, you were the only one you knew, who knew what a cool thing you just did.
True.
You know,
True. Nobody
so,
else even noticed.
yeah,
Maybe that's
but
possible,
it's the idea, right, is to remember those things.
And then to remember how it felt. To go ahead and put yourself in a little place where you can close your eyes. This is about using your creativity, your imagination. Close your eyes and say, how did that feel when I did that? I mean, remember what you were wearing if possible. Remember what it sounded like around you, if people were cheering or not or whatever. Remember just how it felt when you walked out that day that someone gave you a raise, your first raise you got at work, whatever. And that it felt so good. And try to I had said to you, re-envision or re-embody that feeling and carry it with you for a little while if possible. And remind yourself, what this is about is just an exercise to remind yourself that it's possible for you to do something good in the
And
world.
right, so it would help to write it down too, so that
Yeah.
you can remember it quick the next time you need to.
Do you remember? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Do you remember the Charlie Brown thing we talk about sometimes? Lucy Van Pelt said to Charlie Brown one time, Charlie Brown, sometime you lose, sometime you win. You win some, you lose some. And he looked at her and said, really? You mean like it's possible to win sometimes? So that's what you have to remind yourself. Yes, it is. The second point is about looking, now that you've looked into the past and you've reminded yourself how well you can do and even do better than that, it's good to check also your future, which is looking into the crystal ball and saying, okay, what are my possibilities out there? And you can get into that trap, that old mythical, place of saying, well, there's nothing out there for me. We hear of everywhere they're losing jobs, they're firing people, laying off people, so there's nothing out there for me. And that's one way of looking at the crystal ball and into the future. But you and I know already that there are blogs and books and TV shows, everything now about how the workplace is going to look in the future. For example, a lot of people are going online with their businesses. So a lot of people are learning new skills. And it's a thing about saying to yourself once and for all, what would I like to do for work? About enjoying work. Remember we were talking about our relatives. We've got family who can't believe that we love our work. And they are not understanding that. And they're holding it against us in some way, saying, you're not supposed to love your work. You're supposed to be working. It should be like a punishment or something. So, did you have a comment?
No?
No?
No,
You're
you're
ready
doing
to
great.
Plow on.
Just plow
Okay.
on.
All right, we leave that. Keep going. Okay, we keep going. Okay, the reason I talk about doing something that you love and asking yourself what would you really like to do, even if you're working at something else right now, doesn't matter. Then I'm talking to this wonderful microphone here. It's become my friend. It's like this little robot with little feet. It's very cute. Okay, talking to a friend of mine who had become an accountant after these many years. I knew him in the early days as a rock and roll drummer, and he was really good, but he had a wife and a kid and he needed a steady gig. So he became an accountant, a very good one, for years, and he's been in the same office. And now, I asked him not long ago, so what? The kid is long grown, gone, and I said, what would you like to do for work? Because he's thinking about retiring, but he's in this economy, he's not sure. He said, what I would really love to do is learn to make instruments, musical instruments. I said, cool. So my next conversation will be with him, now that I've had time to think about it, is why wouldn't he take a class? Maybe once a week, twice a week, a woodworking class, learning to make guitars, that kind of thing, or drums. I don't know what he wants to make exactly. but to learn the materials, to learn the tools, to see what's out there. He could do that at this point in his life, or like you had said, if he can't,
He could find find the person
Who's
if he-
already doing
who's
it.
already doing it. They always and volunteer to do it for free. You know, to just go there and hang out. Say, look, I'll sweep the floors. I'll do whatever I need to do to hang around.
I'll answer
and
your phone,
watch
I'll
what you
do
do.
whatever. Yeah.
If you will be kind enough to kind of explain some stuff to me, and maybe even tell me. Let's say I decide to go to I try to get a class in woodworking. What should I concentrate in that if I want to make
or where is a
guitars?
good class? Who's
Or-
a good teacher?
and
Right.
so they would be able to help you with that, and they would get someone who was there to sweep the floors or whatever. Almost probably every sound engineer just in my field started out sweeping the floors and making copies of tape copies or cleaning up the place or whatever, so they could hang around and see what happened. And then when somebody needed something to be done, they said, okay, here's how you do this, you know, and they'd show it to them, and then that person could get it off their back and onto you, and you become kind of the you know, it's the grunt guy, and that does all the stuff nobody else wants to do, or they've done a million times and they don't want to do it anymore.
And it's like never too late to be an intern.
Yeah,
Especially
that's
if you
right.
already have an income and you're already at the age where you have a day gig that you're already into. You can still be, and people love that when you come in to do that. So that is about looking into the future and seeing what you would like to do. Because like I told my friend, or you know, we're in discussion about this. Even if you had $1 million right now, you would still have to go back and take the beginning class and learn the materials and so forth anyway. So why not start now anyway? Okay, so that is about looking into the future, into the past, and then the future. And then the third point is to look at where you are realistically, not buying into the myths around you. And I've mentioned one of them a couple of times, which is, oh, I interviewed with that company 10 years ago or 5 years ago and they didn't want me then. You know, chances are really good that even last year they changed all their personnel. So they may not remember that they interviewed you and turned you down. It's okay to go back and do another interview with them. Why not? And
Maybe the
besides,
skills you had then didn't need then, but you have
something they need
you
now.
have new skills now.
You've built up
They
skills
have-
you didn't have when
That's
you
right.
first interviewed with them. So that's happened to me a couple of times where I would interview for some place and they turned me down. And then 6 months later, they'd call me wherever I was and say, "Are you still available?" Who knew? You know, so that can happen, and then you go back for that. So that is about realistically looking at where you are now, not buying into the myths. I have a whole story about buying into the myths. Go for it. Okay. We'll make it as quick as possible. John and I just recently did a workshop in Arizona, in Phoenix. While we were in Phoenix, we have a friend in Sedona who said, would love if you would come to Sedona. It's an hour and a half away from Phoenix, Arizona. Would you come and visit? And we said, well, we don't know if we're going to have time. We're looking to do a book signing. John Brahaney is the author of The Craft and Business of Songwriting, and that book is still going well in music stores and bookstores. So we said we were planning to do a book signing in Sedona if we could nail it down with this one little bookstore that had told us they would like us to come. Fine. So we went to the bookstore in Sedona, and you had called them the week before to say we were coming.
Yeah, we weren't sure that we were going to be able to
have time to
so
do
we didn't
it.
have a lot of
Right.
lead time, and that was
That's
a
not a
factor.
myth. That is a fact.
That was a factor, and so I hadn't given them much notice, but we got there, and
So we talked to them and said, you know, we want to do this. And they said, well, first of all, we need more lead time. Secondly, you know, we would want it to be on a weekend because people in Sedona, here's the myth, don't go out on weekdays or weekdays. And they said, plus we want it in the daytime because if it's the people in Sedona don't drive at night. And then they said, and the people in Sedona, and they went on with this list of obstacles for us that was making me kind of break out in a little sweat because I could see that this bookstore, adorable and wonderful, and we've been there before, they're very nice people, but they have a certain pattern, a certain set of rules that we have to comply with. If not, we can't do the event there. And I respect that. That's how they do their business. That's great. But in the meanwhile, this wonderful friend living in Sedona said, if you can't do it anywhere else, do it at my house. And she opened up her living room and dining room to us and vacuumed and did whatever she needed to do to get it ready for us, which was wonderful. And she got on the phone to 5 friends who got on the phone to 5 friends. And the next thing you know, people were on email and Twitter and Facebook and all these things. Within 1 week, we were set to do an event at her house in Sedona. And by the way, we kept the profits from the book sales. John brought some of his books there. We had a bigger crowd there than we would have had we done it in the bookstore. We had people who knew people who knew people. So they all had someone there they knew. And so they networked together differently than they would have if they had all just been strangers walking into a store and walking out. The thing connected. And we learned a lot because it was something, this is about being realistic. This is point 3, is about seeing where you are realistically. We had a clearer vision of what we could really do, a clearer vision, I think, than the bookstore, because they are stuck, dare I say, with all due respect, with their old business model, and they're inflexible with it.
Well, it wasn't just that either. The lesson here wasn't just that. The lesson was that for us, that could have very easily discouraged us from doing anything at all.
Right.
And we were lucky to have a friend there who was willing to do this.
Oh yeah, we wouldn't have done it
But
without.
the fact is that all of the things that they told us that for the reasons why people wouldn't come were not true. You know, I mean, or at least weren't true for us.
We had it on a day. We had it at night. People did drive. They did come out.
All that, worked out, despite the fact that there was a point where we said, well, looks like it's probably not going to happen,
Yeah,
because
yeah.
these are all the obstacles that we're facing. But we just said, well, let's try this at our friend's place, and so we just. We and they, our friends, made it happen. So a lot of times you have help that you don't realize that you have. And so we could have gotten real insulated and said, well, we can't do anything about it. So and assume that nobody else would be willing to, to jump in and help either. And they did, and it worked.
Right. We were very lucky with that, but we learned a lot. Obviously,
Yeah.
we learned a lot to keep going. Persist. If
Persist.
it's within a realm of realistic, it has to be realistic. Okay. The fourth point on my notes here is just to continue to build your muscles, continue to build your skills. My mom, I have to bring up my mom on this one, was in her 70s when she was keeping books for all my life for their shoe store. My parents were in a shoe business, and in Chattanooga, Tennessee. And it wasn't until she was in her 70s that she started being curious about what is all this computer stuff going on. Now, this is quite a few years ago. But once someone showed her a computer, and then they showed her Excel and they showed her Quicken, she was keeping books. She moved her entire operation from writing by hand on all these ledgers and everything, moved it. She had, back when I grew up, one of those adding machines that your hand crank, I woke up in the morning to that sound on the kitchen table. That was when we had breakfast. I could hear the sound. So that's what she had moved from that onto, and she was one, I think I did a little research on that. In those days, she was in a 10 percentile or something of people 70 years old and above learning computer skills. So her gift to me is that it's never too late. So if you have some skills you think you may need in the future for your work or for even just for things you want to do at home, now's the time. There are more than ever free tutorials on Google, on all that. There are places, there are people to help you out.
So what did she do?
She didn't know about Google and all those things at that point. Yeah. She hired a university student for an hour.
Well, there
a week.
wasn't a Google then.
There wasn't a Google then. But 1 hour a week, she had a kid, as she said, come to the house and teach her how to
do Quicken
and do all of that and do Excel and everything. And she sent me she couldn't type. She sent me an email with like 6 words in it, and I was just so excited. So the lesson to me was it is never too late. You can still try.
And
try
the
to do these
kid
things.
got, the kid who she hired to teach her got to get some teaching
from her,
skills, which is
some
a different,
wisdom from her.
and some wisdom from her.
She was
because
a World War II war bride from Paris. He heard stories, I'm sure, that curled his hair.
And so this kid,
So-
so this kid not only made a friend, but got to learn, got to get some teaching skills.
Right. He had a
And
ball. He
yeah.
had fun with her, and of course she would make him cookies and brownies and all that. So they had a good time, and she learned a lot. But she taught me most of all, never too late. So go, mom. Last of all, number 5, be good unto others, and I said, but also to thyself, because we live in very stressful times. And I said, whether you're wallowing in self-pity or begging for more vacation from too much work, you've got to find whatever it is that works for you. Whether it's meditation and lighting incense and candles, if that works, great. If it's being like our wonderful new president, going out and playing basketball because it helps him to relieve stress, whatever it is, remember to do something like that once a week, once a day, whatever it takes to balance yourself out with all the stress that we're all under. Don't forget your vitamins, get some sleep from time to time.
Have fun, do fun things.
Not
that
too
you
much
like.
caffeine, This is decaf, yes? Oh, it's the real thing. That's why we're talking like this. Okay, so thank you very much for taking the time out to listen to this and to watch it. And if you want to contact me, I think we'll probably have that up there as well, yes? But it is my email, joanne@johnbrahaney.com. Also, I have a blog.
And that's Joanne, Joann.
Right, no E. And Braheny is BRAHENY @johnbrahaney.com. This is John Braheny here. Okay. And the blog is goosingyourmuse.com. And I'm still working on it because everything is in progress. Everything.
But you already
So-
have
Oh, yeah, you're welcome
on
to
my
it.
site. You already have on my site.
I'm on Facebook. I'm
Yeah.
going to learn about Twitter really soon. Someone's helping my great Doug Welch who's running this career camp. Thank you, Doug. This is wonderful. And I already have what?
You already have a blog
Yeah.
that has a lot of information on it.
goosingyourmuse.com.
Yeah.
Yep, look in the archives. Okay, I think that's it. And so we'll say goodnight, Gracie.
Good night, Gracie. Say
Good night, Gracie. Thank you, John.